All right.
Save you $3,000.
We'll call the 6 o'clock meeting of the regular meeting of the Board of Finance at 6:07 to order. Everyone ready? Call the order. Pledge of Allegiance. Again. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, approve the minutes. We have the minutes of June 17th.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Second. We have a motion and a second for the minutes. Any changes?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I have to find them. Paragraph 3, Long Range Planning Committee, first sentence. Just a typo. Mr. Askham stated that one of the goals for the Board of Finance needs an E. And then the only other change that I had was page 3, other business. I think what I said was, I suggested changing the Board of Finance meeting start time to accommodate the scheduled users of the room at the end of our meeting. Because we keep running into somebody else's meeting and we have a whole another board that we're making stand in the hallway. So I don't want to change our meeting to 2 hours or anything. That wasn't my goal. My goal, we should be efficient and get it done whenever. But if we're going to continue to inconvenience other boards, I just suggested we change the start time to accommodate the subsequent meeting that's scheduled here.
So what do you want to say for?
Suggested changing the Board of Finance meeting start time to accommodate the scheduled users of the room.
If we start changing our published schedule, we start running into some real problems.
Right.
With every one of the regular meetings that we've got scheduled.
Right. But it'll be in the future. We have to just, especially when we're going to start scheduling next year, so. Okay.
So
Any other changes? No. Any other changes to the minutes?
Nope.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
I need to abstain. Too.
Okay, 2 abstentions. Minutes passed forward with 2 abstentions. Okay, Finance Director's report.
That's how we
At some
roll.
point, you guys will actually start getting these before the meeting.
There's an idea.
Is that this?
Making changes.
Don't blame me.
Peter, I have to blame you.
Peter, behave yourself.
Fortunately, from month to month, not much has changed. Collection rate's still gonna land right around 99.45.
Wow.
I'll get to the forecast in a couple. We had our initial meeting with the auditors. Obviously, we retained Bloom for another year. They went through their initial surveillance. It actually went surprisingly well, which I was kind of happy with. Can we get that door? Sorry.
All fired up. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
So we're trying to accelerate the timeline a little bit. We're going to be giving the auditors the majority of our work the end of September. We should be done honestly with the majority of our work September 1st, September 10th. But we're targeting a mid-November draft. There was definitely some quality control issues with the last year's audit, so we kind of know what we have to focus on. There's unfortunately a lot of stuff that we do have to clean up. There will be some problem areas with this year's audit, specifically around capital. Anything with encumbrances, you guys were very inconsistent from year to year how they were treated. In some instances, they affected fund balances. In some instances, they didn't. So there's just a lot of cleanup that we're currently working through.
You don't sense a restatement or anything like that, do you?
If I wanted to force it, yeah, but I'm not going to force it. I don't really see the need. It's the same auditor, so
Okay.
have them restate their audit. Prior treatment of bond premiums, we're going to talk a little bit about that at the end of the report. And you guys actually had a lot of line items that were in overspends. Your audits should never be issued with overspends. I'm not really sure how that happens. All right, Simsbury Farm Subcommittee, meetings continue. There's actually been a little bit more progress. Now we're getting into the analysis side on my side, where we're looking at some sensitivities around rates. I'm doing some comparisons against Woodbridge Country Club, and then we're also doing a 10-year trending, looking at basically golf utilization on a state level, or local, state, and nationwide level. see whether or not we're an anomaly. We're actually seeing rounds go up the last year, so it's not looking too bad. All right, estimated reserves. Very little change from last month. Tax collections are coming right in line. I am showing a reserve of 217,000 for, sorry, you might, your stuff is that stuff and that stuff over there. For Simsbury Commons, this was the tax appeal. The Board of Selectmen, after one of the last meetings, kind of settled it. So your impact for this year is going to be 217. We do have the option of whether or not we take the impact this year or next year. I prefer to take it this year.
What's this settlement for? What years?
What do you mean?
What time period is it for?
Fiscal, I think it's fiscal 13 and 14, so there's a
So
little
it's 2 years?
retroactivity.
Yeah.
Correct.
So we should take it this year.
And then the impact for next year is, I think, like 100,000 or 90,000. It's not overly bad. Including the sale of Farrell's Farm and some miscellaneous, about 151,000. You guys are going to be favorable at 1.7 million in revenue. Very solid year. Expenses, I'm including everything that you guys have before you as in regards to transfers, negotiated salaries of the 344. The fiscal year 14 snow, 102,000, the agreed upon procedures, and making Simsbury Farms whole through the end of fiscal 13. That's the 235,000 that we've talked about. Now, when we issue assuming you guys approve that, at the end of this fiscal year, you're still going to see a deficit in that fund. It's right around 175, 185. We're not 100% tied out yet on their credit card receipts. So once we get that, I expect the deficit to be right around, we'll just call it south of 200,000. Then the use of the contingency, and then you guys just had some general favorability of like 110 once everything falls out. So, you guys are looking $1.2 million favorable so far.
So 1, 2, and then we've already taken out, what,
900. Yeah.
935 for
Sounds about right.
capital projects paying
Correct.
cash. So we're about 250, let's say 270. We're gonna probably, the way it looks now, 270, 250 will go back in to undesignated reserves, if this came out the way it reported.
Peter, why wouldn't we consider making up this deficit this year? If we know that the farms is gonna be,
That was more of my direction, or my recommendation to Pete. I don't want to see you guys give relief to Simsbury Farms. I want you to challenge them, right? Because what happens now, if you make them whole this year, and next year with the raise of rates and hopefully an increased volume, because the course conditions truly are fantastic, if they have any favorability, they get to keep it and use it how they see fit. They never pay it back to the general fund. I don't want to overly penalize the general fund if possible. So I'm banking on them actually being favorable in fiscal 15, and eating away at some of that fiscal 14 residual, that 175 that we were talking about.
So what you're talking about is us waiting till next year to see how it clears.
Correct.
Part of what we're working on with the committee is after 15 going forward, and we're trying to work out a better plan, financial plan there. So there's a lot of work to do, and I think the feeling is that we kind of tie it all in together. Now, the risk is with the auditors, they're going to slap our hands saying, gee, you keep having a reoccurring deficit, are you going to get written up? And we talked to the auditors,
Yep.
and they're not as concerned as I am.
No, the auditors are relatively, they were comfortable in that you were fixing the deficit through the end of fiscal 13. They really don't want to see it something that continues year after year after year. I think a lot of this is just related to the economic downturn of 2009, 2008. You really got to look at something over a 20-year period. And
But the rating agencies we have to worry about, as long as we have a plan, so when we go to bond
Yeah.
in January,
Correct.
we should have some plan to say, here's how we solve this problem. We've transferred so much here, we've worked on the 14-15 budget, got better, and 15 going forward, there's a plan to do X, Y, and Z. And therefore, we're going to be solvent, not to worry, it goes away. So I think that's what we're going to propose, because we have to have that plan, otherwise, we have exposure to rating agencies, in my opinion. Sorry.
And, I mean, you and I are on the subcommittee, and Joe's comment about sort of holding their feet to the fire is sort of a key element of what we're trying to build into that. I mean, we've said to them, they need to look at both revenue sources and expense control. It isn't just a one-sided thing, and I think we've made it clear that we don't want to see them coming back to the general fund year after year after year. That's not what it's supposed to be all about.
But some of the solution's gonna be, put the money back in the selectmen's budget too, certain allocation, so it's gonna be a shift, but it hasn't, the plan hasn't been worked out yet, so
Yeah. Right now, it's shaping out to be a shared pain.
there'll be a lot of pain.
General fund bears increased rates and.
Well, I think we're trying to look at best practices and what
Correct.
other funds, other parks and rec committees that have golf courses and other towns do. And, we don't want to be totally out of line with the way these things are typically being handled. And so there's an element of that as well.
Joe, on bond premiums, why don't you go through,
All right,
That
so a little background here. So you guys know when you issue bonds, when you issue bands or bond anticipation notes, when you go to the general marketplace, you receive what's called a premium, meaning investors are willing to pay more than the face value of the bonds. So say, for example, you borrow $1 million, you'll actually receive $1,050,000.
we authorize $1 million, we go bond the million, and we get more money than we authorize to spend and authorize the bond.
And
But we're only paying back the million, but we get this premium.
but that's because of the interest rate structure.
True. You guys have been relatively inconsistent in how it's been treated here, for reasons being there's no policy. So I'd like to come to you guys with some sort of recommendation for how we treat bond premiums. I mean, you can use it to defray future borrowing costs, you can absorb it directly into the general fund. I'm not looking to solve it now, but you guys have done both of that, just relatively inconsistently over the last decade.
So I assume in the next future,
Next
we're
meeting.
gonna have a policy where we'll talk about that,
And you're going to propose that, Joe?
Correct, yes. I actually, probably at the next meeting, I'm going to be coming to you guys with some sort of recommendation what to do with the premiums that are left out there from 2013. Because you guys have projects that you have more revenue in than you guys have approved, and you haven't spent the money.
so if we authorize $1 million, they can only spend $1 million, not $1.1 million. And we might have cash for $1.1 million, so there it sits.
But we amortize that premium over the life of the bond, don't we? No?
Take it now. It's cash.
So we have to-
Modified accrual accounting,
All in
cash
one
basis. It's
all in
great.
one-
Interesting.
Right up front.
But municipal in Gatsby's a little different
So
than
it
the
hits
rest of the
I
world.
guess it is, yes.
Just so I can understand it from a non-accountant perspective, it goes into our book as an asset,
Oh, absolutely. It's
Now.
cash.
even though we may not have have we actually borrowed the money at this point?
You've borrowed the $1 million, but
We
you've
have,
received
okay.
the $1,050,000.
Somebody
So
gave
we've
us
actually borrowed.
more than we actually are gonna pay back.
So,
I'd never seen anything like this.
so why wouldn't we just put the money into the reserves?
No, absolutely. It's
Right now, it's
just-
sitting in capital project, it didn't go there because the last finance director just left it there, or it's been inconsistent.
Yeah, it's
But
just,
we have to say, here's our policy, it all goes into,
It's revenue, it ought to
Right,
go into.
reserves, that's what it should
reserves,
go.
Then we can decide how to use it.
because there's no authorization to spend it, and we
Right.
have to get the authorization, so it should go back into.
Is the $1,050,000 that you're talking about in this example, is that net of the fees that are being paid to the?
no, because the fees that you guys pay are part of what you
Part of
guys
the-
plan. So, yeah, so you guys budget for the cost of issuance. That was part of one of our initial.
That's in the $1 million,
Correct.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
along with.
So we really don't need it, so we over bonded, if we
Yeah, no.
figured out what the net is, we'd only bond $950.
No, I understand, but it depends on what the interest rate environment is every time you do this.
Technically, what we should do is set up a debt service fund, which we don't have, we should create one, put it in there to use for debt relief, because we over bonded.
That's actually a great idea.
So that might be one of the alternatives.
so,
In lieu of just dumping it in an undesignated fund balance and saying, gee, we really, it should be used for debt service, that's what it should be used for. So I think that's one of the things we're probably gonna propose.
Well, any way we do this, the $50,000 is coming back to the benefit of the taxpayers.
Yes, yes.
So, it's an accounting issue, not,
Right. But we don't just put it in the bank and not use
Yeah.
it. Now we're giving them benefit by using it in debt service. It lowers their debt service burden, and they get a immediate tax benefit.
It corrects an over-budgeting problem, too,
Yeah.
because you don't have to even budget less and tax less. It can be using the revenue.
theoretically.
Well,
The good news is we get a premium. As long as we keep, that's good news, we get premium, so that's good for many reasons.
Very,
So,
very
yeah,
com-
these are
very
nice problems to
confident
have.
interest rates.
So in other words, you would, I guess one thought would be that you would use it instead of bonding. And if you put it into reserves and then spend the money on things that you might otherwise bond for, then you're not bonding. Or we'd have greater discretion if we went to the general fund, because then you could also consider using it for the post-retirement benefit, where we derive greater income. What are we earning on our reserves? 0.05 interest, under 1% or something?
Oh, yeah. Unless you want to take Morgan Stanley's word, which is 2% over 6 years CD, but.
But that's something to think about, so hopefully next meeting, there'll be a policy, and we can
Okay.
talk about that, and so keep it on your mind. Put your thoughts in to Joe
Yeah.
as he starts,
I like the idea of debt service.
I do too.
but whatever,
That sounds like
whatever.
a great
just-
idea.
But there's many, so he'll give us choices so we can talk about it, and
Yep.
everyone can do what they feel comfortable with.
I guess wherever we get the most bang for our buck.
Yeah.
Long-range plan, setup. So you guys have given 2 members. The Board of Selectmen has, whatever you want, appointed those members. Board of Selectmen has also appointed Lisa Heavner and Cheryl Cook. Board of Education has yet to meet. By the way, these are going to be public meetings, published, scheduled minutes and all that fun stuff.
You're talking about the long-range planning meetings?
Yeah.
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 Do they have any intention of giving us
Board of Education?
two?
They just don't meet, they don't meet.
You're the rep. Sorry, kid.
Can't they,
I'm sure they're intending.
Yeah.
I mean, they must be able to, some mechanism they can decide who to be on this.
Yeah, and we can still have our meetings before they appoint anyone.
You can start a framework, get something going, so.
So
We already have.
we had a preliminary meeting, just a quick update, and I know we have another one scheduled for this Thursday. And
Oh, yeah, those are subcommittee, non-public meetings, yes.
those are kind of just subcommittee
Those are you
meetings to
helping out staff.
figure out how we want to lay things out, so that when we start with these meetings, there's data, and there'll be something for people to look at, so we'll get a jump start rather than get a bunch of people in the room and have us look at each other. We'll start with a database, and so we sort of had pre-meetings to work through.
Come with some
How we
ideas.
approach it.
Good, fantastic. All right, anything else?
That's all I had.
Good. All right.
That's all I had.
Reserve policy. Now, we handed out a reserve policy to talk about. What I'd like to do is just discuss it. I don't want to vote on it tonight. What I'd like to do is, anybody's thoughts, kind of go through some highlights of it. Joe, maybe you could kind of work us through a couple areas that, we should focus on. There's some discretion or decision, so people are aware of it. And then, people think about it, because, we haven't had one in a while, never had one, so I don't want to just ram one in. I want us to think about it and make sure we understand what we're doing, because sometimes there's unintended consequences from putting in a policy.
Yeah.
So I want us to think this through and make sure we get it right.
Now, you guys obviously understand the importance of something like a fund balance policy. Rating agencies react very positively to these. Reason being, Connecticut, we generally have a lower fund balance percentage requirement. Reason being, our revenue streams are relatively predictable. Most of our taxes are through basically taxing of houses and vehicles and items like that. Whereas other states, it's mostly driven by sales tax and income tax, so it's not as predictable. But state of Connecticut having a fund balance right around 12% is relatively low for some of the rating agencies' perspective. So we wanted to put something that gave a conceptual framework that not necessarily tied our hands, but provided guidance on how we're supposed to react. So the parts were probably most pertinent to you guys
Well, the first page is kind of, you know, talks about policy and then talks about government fund types. It's just definitional. It's nothing magical there, right?
Correct.
And do we have, I just had a question on the first page. Do we have all of these different, all of the funds that are defined? Do we have family funds versus general fund? I mean, there's 5 different categories here. Do we have at least one of each?
You have 4 out of the 5?
I'm not necessarily sure that you have permanent funds,
That's what I mean.
because
Okay.
it
Well,
excludes trust funds, but still, it's not a bad idea to
We
just,
could have a permanent fund if the Board of Ed money is looked at properly.
yeah, it's also
That would be
true.
a permanent fund.
Joe,
Like
what,
Allen Fund
Not
gets set
technically a
up.
trust.
Joe, why don't you add some examples under each of these categories that are
Examples from Simsbury.
Okay.
from us, yeah.
I think that'd be helpful. And if we don't have one, then there's not much point defining it, but unless we're planning to use it in the future.
Will do.
What is a private purpose trust fund?
I'm sorry?
Definitionally, in accounting terms, what is a private purpose trust fund?
Mary, don't we have several trust accounts,
There's social
You know.
services.
Enos and
We
things
have
like
some
that?
off books too.
Trust
Right.
accounts that are set up for particular purposes, and they're managed by the probate court, their oversight.
We have about 4 of them. I think.
Donations that were made, they're part of bequeath, put them in part of their budget. We disclose it as part of our town budget.
It's in the audit, but not fully,
When they say private purpose, that's because it's a purpose that's been designated by the donor?
Yes,
In other words,
exactly.
Yeah, we can
It's
use.
for a public purpose. but-
Some are for transportation only, some are for Eno Hall only,
Okay.
and some are for Port of Simsbury only.
And typically, we can use the income, but not the
Hospital
corporate.
beds.
Right. We
excluded
don't,
there.
we don't do anything with we just get the money from them. The trustee just sends us the check. I try to get the auditors to put the number in the nonprofit world, you account for it on the balance sheet. In the government world, you don't for some reason, so the accounting business is inconsistent here. So I try to get them to put the numbers in between schedules where they'd be listed. So unfortunately, last year it didn't get in. I gave Joe the numbers from the year before, but it's some considerable sums of money out there.
You want to show them as basically as footnotes.
Yeah, well, it's just
Yeah.
somewhere
Yeah,
can
just so
read
that-
there's
yeah.
a few $1 million out there that
Exactly,
we get
yeah.
the benefit of.
Yeah.
Should we also then put a definition in for that, noticing that we define all the others? What a private purpose?
Yeah, I can do that.
That's
Permanent funds, the reason that you'd want to put this in here is at some point, if you don't have it already, you will. This is very similar to what the high school what the Board of Ed just got with that grant, where they're supposed to be using that revenue, the interest on that revenue for a recurring event. So,
I read this, I was trying to figure out, it says maybe, permanent funds may be used for purposes that support the reporting government's programs. The reporting government, in other words, only programs that are reported, is that what that is intended to mean?
not really sure from a legal standpoint.
So the reporting government,
It means the government that does the reporting on.
So,
yeah, that's ours.
like,
Reporting
the
government,
town of
that's,
Simsbury.
Got it, okay. All right, just these side group, whether we do to have maybe a definition, or the examples would be helpful. Because when I look at private purpose trust fund, I think of something not, I don't know why would be involved with something for a private purpose. It's for a public purpose, but it's a private donor, I guess.
this was probably taken out of best practices out of a GASB book and then not modified for a particular town.
Right.
So that's what it is, right?
Oh, this is absolutely best practices, town of Fairfield. Slight adaptation to a few of the terms, but,
Well, we can make it
Written for
even better,
accountants.
then it'll be the town of Simsbury.
oh, Fairfield, they had a good finance director down there. He was a good guy. So next page, fund balance definitions.
No.
What's that one?
Is that where you came from?
No, I was, I forget what town I came from. It's a long time ago. All right, fund balances, you guys are familiar with those. Restricted fund balances, non-spendable, a lot of prepaid items. I tried to give some explanations in there. Restricted fund balance, grantors, bondholders, unrestricted. The real intent that what we tried to touch on here was the next page, which is the appropriate level of unrestricted fund balance to be maintained in the general fund.
Is it back to the second page, the bottom there?
Typo in both paragraphs. The fourth word in both paragraphs should be is, not in.
I didn't have that, but I'm not, my eyes don't work that good for small, but, thank you. So we're talking about, this is like the order of how we spend money. We've had this come up a few times, so we have to get this in a few areas. You know, what comes first, because let's use the example of, town puts in money, you get some grant money from the state, and you bond some money. What's going first? What money you spend first? So if there's, whose money did you spend, and when you got money left over, whose money is it? What are you following? So we have to make sure we cover those too. This covers partially that situation. So we have to make sure that we get that in a policy.
Are we talking about guidelines that are in the state and federal single tax or audits there, as to how we have to spend the funds there? I mean, it should be consistent, right?
No, it's just accounting that we say we spend grant money first, or we spend this money first. So we don't run into trouble where somebody says, hey, you owe us back some of the grant, you didn't spend it all. Because if the town put in money and they put in money, well, whose money do we spend first?
But theirs is almost always restricted, so the way this is written, we're covered.
Yeah.
We're spending the state's money first.
Right.
And then what's left is ours.
Yeah.
Yeah, this covers it though, doesn't it, these two
Yeah,
paragraphs?
Yeah, but that's why we have to have certain
Right.
things in there to.
I was just going to suggest on page 2 at the top of the chart, just maybe make that all caps, decision-making authority and further action to be taken, just to show them as the categories.
And so, Joe, when, on the third page, can you just go over, I just got a little lost on the higher minimum target levels. I didn't, following circumstances would justify higher minimum target levels. I didn't see where it was
Why don't we go,
talking about lower minimum target.
why don't we go
levels.
with the first, why don't we just go down first paragraph where we're setting a 10 to 12%
Yep.
guideline. So that's what we're saying, a range we want, 10 to 12?
Correct. Well, that was my general recommendation. 10% would be an absolute minimum. I mean, I definitely wouldn't go lower, but, 12%, if you guys want to go higher,
No.
I'd be fine with that, but that's really your call.
Well, when we use the word guidelines, which is the heading of this whole section, I've had this problem with what we've been, when we have discussions for years, we've talked about policy and guidelines. And to me, a policy is something you can't violate, and a guideline is something you can choose to violate. For years, we've talked about the 7% policy or guideline on our bonding, requirements and so forth. What do we mean here, I guess, is one question I would have. And then secondly, 10 to 12 seems to me to be fairly narrow band. I don't have a problem with saying we'd like to be over 10. I've got a problem with saying, gee, if we get over 12, we all of a sudden got to start doing something with it, which may not make sense under the circumstances.
But I think that's anticipated here, because it says, in the event it's greater than 12, the excess may be used.
I understand
It
that.
doesn't force you to do something, it gives you the option to do something.
I agree with you, but one of the things we discovered a few years ago is if you look at the reserve levels of towns across this country, they're all over the place, and in some cases, you see reserve levels of 25% or higher, which
I think that's overtaxing people.
Well,
You're taking their
I
money
don't
and sticking it in a dead account.
I don't disagree with you, but
That's the next paragraph down.
Yeah.
The following circumstances often justify significantly higher minimum targets. If you have volatility in your revenue stream, 25% is where it's at.
Oh, so the minimum target, so that's what I was asking about earlier. That word, the minimum target level,
Correct.
that's what's because that word isn't used higher up. So the 10
Understood.
to 12 is the minimum target level?
Well, 10 would be the, well,
Well, I think 10 to 12, I think you're meaning
that's
12,
fair.
so if you want to go higher, because, so that these circumstances, we'll probably let it go higher, because there's a lot of unknowns, bigger unknowns. And one of the things could be the Hartford leaving. You know, if we determine that that's going to happen and there's going to be $1.2 million hit, that's a reason
To
to
leave a
allow
little
it to
more.
go, or
Smooth it.
call it not committed, but restricted. We could actually do, instead of unrestricted, call it restricted a plan. Remember, I briefly mentioned that, but those are the kind of things they talk about here.
Right.
In here, what in your mind would allow it to go higher? Like when we had the storm a couple of years ago, we had a lot of unknowns. We could have lost $4 million, so we didn't want to spend a dime of reserves. I mean, we were brutal on reserves because we had some big unknowns. As soon as they got known, we let up, and we had easing of expenditures because it became known. That big $4 million risk went down to like 700 or 600, so we felt a lot better.
And I think that's why, to Nick's question, I'm comfortable calling this a guideline,
Yep.
because I think everybody will honor it as something you don't violate cavalierly, but that we all recognize there are unforeseen circumstances that we need to be able to, bob and weave, as they say, in order to, address whatever comes up, so
Now,
it gives flexibility.
The other reason I would just say, I agree with that, is that the composition of this board changes as well, and so you're really looking at, if it's a policy, having to revisit this essentially every election cycle.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's a guideline, it's more flexible.
Well, so we need to be careful. This is a policy.
Well, we're calling it a policy, but I
the
think
guide-
what we're
the 10 to 12 is a
suggesting is
guideline.
that there are guidelines within the policy. The policy, I think, is that portion of,
Yeah, it's the
Yeah,
10.
page
I would see in the
22.
future that you would want to revisit certain provisional ranges every couple of years, just to say, are we comfortable with these ranges?
Well, I sit on boards where policies are reviewed by the board and reapproved every year,
Right? We can do that?
as just a standard procedure.
I mean, we could do that too, but I like the policy statement. I like it's, the policy is intended to provide for the fund balance which satisfies the cash flow and contingency needs of the community, at the same time avoiding overtaxed citizens to an excessively large fund balance. And so I think, I like the idea of having a policy. I think that's entirely accurate, but then I think the guidelines are generally, as Linda said, to effectuate or operationalize, so to speak, the policy, but there could be exigent circumstances that necessitate deviating from that policy.
Now, one other thing here, we talk about excess. And we've been basically following these principles. Our board has, unofficially, we've been following these principles. So that's, I think the method to the madness is we've been, for future debt payments, we've been, we geared up for, I think, before the high school, and we planned like 3 years in advance before the high school came on. We did a lot of planning for that, because we knew that was going to bankrupt our debt policy. So we took a lot of pains to plan ahead for that. We survived it. Capital non-recurring fund, we've transferred money into capital, paid cash for capital projects. We put money in the capital non-recurring to fund operating needs. We've transferred money to the pension or OPEB trust with Exeter. We've done that. Now, one of the things we're about to do, and we got to think about that, the unintended consequences, we're about to transfer money for Simsbury Farms. That's not any of these.
So do we need a category that says other there?
Well, we need something for non-reoccurring expenses. What we don't want to do is have a policy that we
there's a
do,
non-recurring.
that we do off-budgeting
Okay.
through our reserves.
But it's not actually taking us down below 10 or 12%, so.
No, but what happened, Linda, is let's say we have a reoccurring expense, and we just, instead of budgeting for it, we just pay for it out of reserves every year.
Yeah, that's wrong.
Now, we kind of had that once when we were doing, what was it, the legal on
Yeah,
Meadowwood.
right.
We kind of had that situation where that was kind of the thing we just didn't budget and paid
Yep.
for.
Well, the problem was.
That was bad.
The problem is we didn't,
Right.
we chose not to budget it right,
Right, we chose not to.
over and over again.
Right,
Yeah.
but it was reoccurring for a while. It wasn't a non-reoccurring, so, right, that became a lot of money.
Yeah, it was,
Doesn't that, wouldn't Simsbury Farms fall under the unanticipated budgetary shortfalls?
Yeah.
yeah, unless you
Right.
have
So I
them
think
every
I
year.
think we have to look
Well,
at,
yeah,
Yeah,
We have to look at-
unanticipated is the
right,
question.
becomes the
I
anticipated.
think we need to expand this a little bit here and what we want to put in there for something to give us some wiggle room so we don't violate our policy day one. I don't think we want, it's good policy to put it in and violate it.
I guess. no.
Also, if we're going to transfer money to set up the open space, we would have to be non-recurring type expenses.
Capital non-recurring fund, that's what that refers to, it's a specific fund.
Yeah, no, but Peter, are you referring to, you don't want to violate these 6 bullet points?
The three.
Or the 1, 2, 3?
Well, we were talking about, I think, the
The
1,
action-
2,
In relation
3.
to Simsbury Farm?
No, not like we have money coming out of reserves. We say here, we're going to transfer the excess for 3 things,
One, two,
according to
three.
this.
Yeah, but
So if we do it for Simsbury Farms, it's not one of these 3.
I see what you're
But it may
saying.
not even be excess. I mean, it may not be violating the 12%. The
Right.
transfer to Simsbury Farms has nothing to do with the 1, 2, 3.
Yeah,
That's, that's what you do
Well,
if
no,
you
but
have
what it
too
has to
much
do is the
money.
excess over 12%.
so,
Right.
But we may not have excess over, I mean, we might
We do.
do that even if we,
Well, what are we at now?
hey, guys, that one paragraph, in the event of the balance greater than 12%, is only talking about if you're over 12%. It's not addressing needs. It's not addressing shortfalls
Yeah,
elsewhere.
we understand.
And that's not the intent of it. I forget what you're.
but my point is that this paragraph isn't necessarily the only circumstance under which you would cover the Simsbury
Right.
Farms. You might cover Simsbury Farms if you're
that's-
just at 12%,
Right,
and you're gonna
down
cover
below.
them, and it takes
We
you
we
down
also
to
have the 1%,
11.5.
I mean, we're transferring money for operating needs where like the snow or it's shortfall in the budget. You know, we do those transfers and that's our emergency 1%.
Right.
That's outside of this.
Should it be, or should we include that in here too?
We should probably include that.
But
The
I
emergency
don't,
1%.
I don't think it should be included in here
Why?
because.
Why do we need the guidelines?
Yeah, you don't want to put that in there.
Because
That's
then
not
the
an
only
investment.
way
This
you
is
could
talking
do
about
that
investment.
is if you are over 12%.
Right.
Those transfers are being made even if you're not
Right,
over
regardless of
12%.
what our, right, I hear you, okay. Yep,
I mean,
I think
do
you're
we
right.
even-
Joe's using the word, these are investments, effectively.
Right.
Right.
So why do we need this paragraph at all? In other words, we're talking about, as a general guideline, the budget should be 10 to 12%. If it's over 12%, it strikes me that we would put the money where it will gain the best bang
Well,
for its buck for
I
the
think it's
taxpayers.
useful to have this, but it doesn't actually restrict you because it's permissive. It says
That's
the
true, it's
excess
permissive.
may
That's
be
true, that's
used.
true.
And it doesn't say that it may only for these 3. I mean, you may use it for anything. It doesn't really restrict you. These
So-
are just sort of ideas.
So just
Something that the
ideas,
rating
okay.
But
agencies look at.
guidelines.
So they're gonna look at, this is favorable if we're
Yeah.
saying,
Okay.
if we have a fund that exceeds 12%.
That's a good point.
These are our priorities.
Yeah.
And these are
We're not
problems.
limited to these,
Right.
but these are our
Yeah,
priorities.
I mean, I
And we
like-
have problems because our pension and OPEB are underfunded, less than 80%, so I would assume that the more we put in there, we solve that problem. They see we're solving our
Right,
underfunded
right.
problems.
Right.
Paying cash for capital takes debt burden off us. You know, they like that we reduce
Right.
the debt. These are kind of geared towards what the rating agencies like.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
That's what
that
they're
makes
kinda
sense
geared
then.
towards, I think.
So the next paragraph says the following circumstances often justify a significantly higher minimum target level. I'm thinking, is that a higher minimum target level being higher in the range of 10 to 12?
Yes.
Yeah. You
Can we
bump it up
clarify
to
that?
The
Yeah,
25s.
and that's
But-
what I was getting at earlier.
I thought
You've
so,
not
yeah.
used that word before, so
Probably right.
maybe if you, where it says guidelines, if you put a sort of title of this section of minimum target levels, so you know that the 10 to 12% is the minimum target level, because otherwise you've raised this word and nobody knows what
Or
it is.
parentheses, minimum target levels, something to
Right.
identify.
I mean, somewhere you need to define
Got
it,
it.
that's that. And
Or-
also, you don't want a significantly higher levels, plural, so it's either a level or get rid of the A and make it plural. Sorry to be nitpicky, but.
So the other observation I had was the first paragraph is said without any wiggle room, and it says your budgets shall stay within 10 to 12. The rest of it deals with actual results. So I don't know if that's the intent, that we might want to split this out a little bit and have budgeting, it's not optional. When we're doing the budget, we're going to plan for
Yeah.
10 to 12.
So
Unless there's justifiable reasons for setting target levels as set forth below, something like
that 10% number, that's the bottom. And then if you go down below, if at the end of the fiscal year, the fund balance falls below 10%, the Board of Finance shall prepare and submit a plan for expenditure reductions and/or revenue increases. This ties your hands.
Right.
Hypothetically. I mean, it's just a plan.
Right, and that's on actuals, but for the budget,
Because we've done this once before. When we bought the Save the Woods, the Ethel Walker land, we took $3 million out of reserves because otherwise we'd have violated our debt policy. So the only way to make that happen is we took $3 million out of reserves, put it towards that, bonded $5 million, and to stay within our debt policy. So that dropped our reserves down to about 7.5%.
Right.
Which the board wouldn't let it go below 7.5 because that was the range back then. So after 7.5, you'd get dinged on your bond rating. So our goal was to get back to 10.
And we've been working on it for
And we've
the
been
last
working on it.
5 years.
Right, we've been working on that for 10. So that was our plan to get back.
And this is talking about within 1 year, the next budget cycle. So we've been working on it, we're back, but do we want to go with that 1 year
Well,
period?
we might have a plan how to get back. Maybe we don't leave it,
Right, but so the Board of Finance take the action necessary to restore to acceptable levels within 1 year of the next budget cycle.
well, we should maybe just say we have a plan. We don't,
so can I just go back to my point? Sorry, I guess I didn't make it very clearly. The first sentence is the one I'm concerned about because it is restricting the budgeting. And I think when you're budgeting, you may also know, for instance, that we're losing the Hartford. It's just an example and it may not happen. But if it was that we're losing the Hartford's revenue in the following year, we may want to intentionally budget to leave this at 14% for that year to hold funds back so that when the entire money's gone from their portion of the property tax, you could phase it in. So this is not giving you the flexibility in the first sentence on budgets, even if you know some of these.
it is.
But it is because of this
Not in the budget.
Fourth bullet point.
I don't think so.
Well, it says the following circumstances justify a higher target level, and the fourth one is reliance on a single corporate taxpayer.
So it allows you to exceed the 12.
I think that
Well, that was the-
modifies the actual results, and that's why I'm trying to get everybody back to the structure of.
Barbara's right, because
I
How
get
it's
Barb.
written.
So you make it less restrictive on the top side.
Yes, yes. So I'm just saying that you maybe even want to set this up with headers, that this is budgeting what we're going to do, and then this is actuals what we're going to do.
Right. I originally had a different statement in there that, basically, once you hit 12, or let's say you hit 14, that 2% would go back and offset operating budget. But that's a bad behavior to get into, and rating agencies actually don't like it. But Fairfield did have that. So that's why that stayed in there. So I tend to agree with you. I think we should open up the language where it says nor more than 12% to
Unless,
get rid of the nor, of not less than 10%.
Why don't we let
Well,
Joe?
I like it to not be, I like that range myself. I like the 10 to 12.
Should- how about
And I
the-
don't mind, I agree with Barbara's point that, if you've got some special circumstance that you might want to float it up there. But I don't want the general policy to be that we have wads and wads and wads of people's taxpayers' money.
But keep
sitting
in
at
mind,
a
if you make
2%,
this restrictive
0.2%.
and you end up at 13, 14%, there's certain members of the public, one of which may be in the room, will say that you're violating this policy.
that's right. And you are. We shouldn't write a
It's a
policy.
I'm
guideline.
not
It's not a
pointing at
policy.
anyone.
Right, that's what I'm saying, it's a guideline. I think we should maybe define,
And if you put in, dot points, as you have here with the 6, maybe you want to bring them up higher again, or repeat them. But if you give yourself the guidelines about when you'd go higher than 12%.
So I
Why don't
could-
we let Joe come back, write it again,
fine.
and we'll put it on the agenda next time. We got everyone really focusing on it. which is good, and that, because there's a lot of unintended consequences from writing policies or guidelines. And the first one is it a policy or guideline? So there's a lot of.
Well, it is a policy, so we have to start there. It's a
Right.
policy. What we're saying is, within a policy, can you have a guideline?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess maybe we have to have a policy, then have separate guidelines that are to implement the policy.
Well, you can have laws that are permissive, so why not have guidelines,
Right.
policies that are permissive?
That's true, you could also frame the
I'm not
policy.
sure that a policy it's mutually exclusive, guidelines or policy.
I like the policy statement. I really do, but I also think we need to have the discretion, the authority to
Right.
deviate when circumstances dictate.
And I don't think that using the word guidelines gives you that. I think it's the language you write that gives you it.
Yeah, that's right.
So, to me, this is a policy. We can't kid ourselves and say it's not. And even if we label it guidelines, it's still really a policy. We just have to give ourselves enough room in there that it gives you flexibility to use it as a
Flexibility.
guideline.
Then maybe we need to widen the band.
Yes. I
Well, or
agreed
not
when you
widen
said
the
that.
band, but
Provide
add
permissive
some-
language.
Change some of the language down below.
Change
Yeah.
some of the language to make it clearer
I'd be,
what
you know, I'd be
kinds of
open if any of you guys want to
circumstances.
send over recommendations, it's fine. I would just encourage you guys are not allowed to CC each other on constructive emails like that, so only send them to me.
See, personally, I'd like to see the band widened so that, for example, it said, you know, we'd like to have the reserve level between, and I'm just picking numbers now, 8 and 14, but we have a target of 10 or higher. And then, you know, it gives you more I think that gives you more flexibility, but personally.
That gives you a lot of flexibility, but the voters are gonna say that's a heck of a range, and we took our foot off the gas pedal and we hit 12. I mean, in my mind, we're at that point where we have plenty of money.
Yeah, but what we need to be able to do is handle building a new high school or taking
Right.
care of a major snowstorm disaster type thing, or being able to do something like Ethel Walker Woods without jumping through so many hoops that we end up, causing ourselves a
But
lot
we
of
can,
problems.
we have charter provisions that we can do that.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Maybe we have to put some language that the other charter revisions that are not included in this.
could we just say the town board shall maintain an unrestricted general fund balance of at least 10% of the total operating general fund expenditures, and then have some guidelines for when you might go higher, or if there are certain exigent circumstances that would dictate you go lower, like the situation with the 7.5%. I mean, would that make more sense? Rather than getting to the whole budgeting process and everything else? I mean, it's all within the purview of this board anyway.
Why don't we send our suggestions to Joe? Let him come back with a new draft. We'll put it on again. And maybe he can send it out to everyone once he has a new draft, and then people can keep giving him suggestions. And then we'll put it on next meeting. I mean, we've never had a policy. I think it's good we're having this discussion, and I think we're eventually going to get one, and hopefully we'll get one that everyone feels comfortable with in the next meeting or two. But I think we got to, because it is important, this is a very important policy, that we really think about it. So let's keep putting our thoughts. Joe, you can work another one. You've heard some good comments. So in essence of time, we have to move on.
Peter, can I just add one more thing? The use of unrestricted fund balance will be allowed under the following circumstances: operating emergencies and unanticipated budget shortfalls. That goes back to, we're allowed to use 1%, and the charter sets that. So I'm nervous that putting that in here, which is why I said before, should the charter 1% be part of this? If you're going to put
Yeah,
that
and
sentence
keep
with
in
those
mind, nothing,
bullets.
you guys can't issue any doctrine or any document that violates your charter.
Well,
Your
that's
charter's
right,
the
but-
overarching.
But this makes it look like you can use it for these with no restrictions, and we have a charter restriction on it. So if you're gonna put that in here, then I think you gotta deal with the charter.
Or at least reference it.
Reference it as, consistent with, or pursuant to.
That's the small print you put in the disclaimer.
Or the
It's
footnote.
actually on there. I'll make it a little bigger.
Moving right along, Mr.
All right.
Chairman.
All right, we've had a lively discussion, I appreciate it. I'm sure Joe appreciates it. Budget transfers, we have to do this. We didn't get to them last time, so let's transfer away.
All right, so hopefully most of you guys have heard of all these. First one was the contractual changes. This is the, in essence, planning flub. It's about 346,000. This is more of what they need, not necessarily what they're entitled to. What they were entitled to was actually slightly higher than that. It was closer to like 400,000.
But 150 was already budgeted for, so you're just moving 150 out of contingency.
Out of contingency.
And
yeah.
out of reserves are 196,035.05.
Correct.
So that's what we're formulating.
And that, just to clarify, that's not because there were contract changes that we couldn't have anticipated. It was really a budget error in the process when we did the budget a year ago.
Yeah, me, if I had been here a year ago, you guys would
We
not
would have
had
planned
this
for it,
problem.
right.
Well, it should have been happening
Well-
over a 2-year period, because it took 3 years to
So,
negotiate, right?
At the end of fiscal 13, I would have taken off,
Right.
196,000, and I would have put it into a fund and said, this amount is encumbered for this future liability, and then once we awarded the contract, I would have hit away at it.
You gotta remember, 2 years ago, we had a unanticipated turn back into more than anybody figured. We estimated 100,000 coming back, and 400 came back, so 300,000 came out of the blue, and
Which is where, this is where it came from.
this is where it came from.
Yeah, it's part of
Shouldn't
it.
have happened.
Right, I'm just making sure that when we're explaining it and anybody's listening to this, they understand that
Right.
we're not just paying more salary dollars at the end and making adjustments. This is truly a correction for something that was missed.
Yes. And the money was put into reserve, so now we're just taking it out.
Right.
And
We're putting it back.
do you want to do these one at a time, or how do you want to do? What's your pleasure in
We
that?
can
think
do
you
them in
guys have to
total.
do it.
In total? Okay. Let's go through the next one.
All right. Next one is for fiscal 14 snow. You guys had more snow events than I've ever heard of. I think Tom Roy said something like 52 snow events. Like every other community in the town, you guys had higher than expected salt usage and some additional labor. So it was right around 98,000 or 97,688. Again, this is just coming from general fund balance. So it's an appropriation from fund balance.
Okay. Next one.
Agreed upon procedure. This is with Bloom Shapiro. This is for the agreed upon procedures that we did. They've been paid for it. I believe that you guys were the ones that approved it. This was not, there wasn't funds for this.
We did.
Oh, I guess I could probably technically take it out of my salaries line if you needed.
14,800, so, okay.
14,800. Big ticket item, Simsbury Farms cleanup. This is the number from the audit, the 234,950. Again, there will be another deficit at the end of this fiscal year. It's right around 175,000. Hopefully it's not higher than that.
The 234, though, is a cumulative of a few years. It's not just 1 year.
Yeah.
So,
And then there is one more, and that's the memorandum from Hiram Peck. It's $25,000 for the purpose of updating the town of Simsbury zoning regulations. Now, what's fun about this one is,
where is that?
sorry, it's this memorandum right here. It's also this slight Excel sheet.
The 25?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, but don't you have it in,
where's the Excel?
where's the Excel?
Oh, sorry, it's right there.
It's on the
last.
It's the last page of the.
All right, so Hiram's looking for $25,000 to update the town of Simsbury zoning regulations. Now, one thing I have kind of enjoyed during my time here, it seems like everything I find is actually good things. You guys have $25,000 left in an old capital non-recurring fund. It's long been closed, activity's long been out, it's about $25,600. This is a $25,000 event, so I recommend funding that out of that fund, which is Fund 305. You guys are also going to be getting more capital non-recurring favorability coming back to you guys. The way you guys do capital non-recurring is relatively interesting because you guys do this repayment methodology where you repay it or you amortize it over 5 years and pay it back. There's nothing in place that says if someone underspends, don't send the money over. So you guys have created these little pockets of assets and relatively sizable.
So this is money put aside in there that's come out of operating budget, so we're not,
Absolutely. And also another thing that hadn't necessarily been followed, you guys have a policy for capital non-recurring. Those projects, once you approve them, they have like 18 months to 2 years to spend it. They don't extend beyond that.
We need to
So-
close those down.
Oh, I'm hammering away. And listen, I'm giving a lot of people a reprieve right now, just letting them spend their fiscal 12 or fiscal $13. But it's been well articulated to the department heads. Policies are in place. We'll be following them if they're there.
Can you explain this last, I get all the first ones because we've talked about the first grouping a lot. This last one,
Yep.
I don't understand why this wasn't budgeted or planned for. Why is this a brand-new expense coming up right now?
I will gladly not give you a full line of BS and just say this won't happen again next year. This should not happen. This should be planned for.
But this is a, kind of like a non-reoccurring expense? I mean, I remember once we gave money, our board gave some money out of reserves for writing some regs. How long ago, Nick? I mean, that was
It was
a long time ago.
At least 5 or 6
And they
years
never
ago.
happened.
Right.
They never got finished. I think Dunny Barney was charged of zoning. They came in and made a appeal to us for money, and we gave them money to write the regs, and
Well,
It never happened.
See, that's one, but, I mean,
they started and they never finished.
I was, when I saw this, I was bothered by the fact that I thought we had already done this.
Right.
It has to be at least 6 or more years ago.
It was a long time ago.
It was about a little, like 5 years ago. Yeah.
You guys believe that you did the
You were on
same
the
effort,
board then.
probably
I
in
was on the
capital
board then,
non-recurring? I wonder if
No,
that's
no,
a
no,
favorable
no,
vote.
no, we gave money for rewriting
To
the zoning
write-
regs.
Out of the operating budget or capital? or-
Out of reserves.
Out of reserves.
Yeah, so it's back with you anyway if it hasn't been completed.
I mean, whatever work they did, it's,
No one could figure out.
I
I mean,
mean,
will this get them done? I mean, I guess the question is, fool me once, can you fool me twice? I mean, are we gonna really?
Doesn't the Board of Selectmen have to vote on this?
they already did.
They
Very
did.
good. I guess the zoning regulations,
Well,
there've
they
been a
should
lot
find the
of
money.
changes from a policy perspective the last several years with the charrette and everything else, so maybe since 5 years ago, there's a need to update them now. I mean, I don't know if it's a every 5-year deal. I
But it
think
should
that-
have been known at budget time. This is,
No, that's, I mean, he's already said it won't happen again.
I don't disagree with you, Bob.
But isn't there a,
And I'll make sure this doesn't happen next
so
year.
why don't we make them take it out of their, find a way to fund it? We're not doing year-end transfers
Fiscal
for next
15?
year.
I don't know if you technically
Was
can.
this already spent?
No.
No, so this is this year's spending. At year end, let's deal with it. If they can't, they should be charged to find it out of their budget somewhere. I mean, we shouldn't be, well, that's like increasing the budget right now, right?
All right. I hear your point, but I think we need to do the zoning regulations. If they're gonna do them, my concern is, regardless of where it comes from, are they gonna get done?
Right.
And unfortunately, we're gonna have to ride herd on it, manage the project. And I think we're gonna need a report every month as to the progress.
Well, so maybe the question is, do they need the $25,000 approved in advance of doing the work in order to pay a subcontractor?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Cannot advertise, cannot sign a contract without it. Unless you guys want to
So
give
we'll
the
pay 'em
blanket
after
go-ahead.
No,
Yeah, no, you can't do that.
but we gotta make sure that covers doing it, and then they adopt it, or at least get what they want. They'll probably sit on for a while, but at least we get something for the money.
Well, and having said that, $25,000 for a consultant to update a lot of regs is not a ton of money.
I know.
So what are we
Well-
really getting for that?
Yeah. To me, having been on the other board, it seems like we are constantly asking for money for regulation, to update zoning
For zoning.
regulations. That's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there has been a lot of changes in land use over the past 5-6 years, and even with the charrette here, and the move to, what is it, use-based, what have you.
Well, can we ask them to come to our next meeting? I mean, can we put this on, I mean, I don't think any of us knows exactly what this is gonna be used for, so do we wanna just say?
We can put it on hold and
Put it
ask
on hold
Hiram
and
to show up.
And have Hiram to
and-
show up and defend it, like, what are you
Right.
doing with this, and when was the last time you did this, and
Yeah.
is
Technically, what we should do is
$25,000 gonna do it?
beforehand, we knew about it, we should ask these questions beforehand, so we're apprised of it, that's what we should do.
Especially after it was tabled last month.
Yeah, I mean, so we.
I told
we didn't-
you.
Did he address it last month?
I don't know.
No,
No, but I
mean,
told him it was an
He should have
issue
been
last
here,
month.
Yeah.
we have the ability to call up and ask and directly communicate, so I don't, it's not the end of the world if we hold it up, I mean, it's,
I just don't know from a marketing perspective for the Hartford. I mean, I know they were looking at regulations of that into town. I do think they want to move ahead on this, and they want the town to be as competitive as possible. And from a timing perspective, a month could make a difference if they're looking at prospective buyers. And
I mean, whatever we do, we
I
have to.
don't doubt the need for the 25,000. There's clearly a need to update the regulations, and I don't doubt the need for it. I mean, we know it should have been in the budget, but
So I make a motion that we approve the fiscal year 14 budget transfers set forth in the June 3rd, 2014 memo from Joe Mancini in the following amounts: 346,035.05, 97,688, 14,800, and 234,950,000. Is there a second?
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion.
Personally, I'd like to go ahead and just get this off, get it.
We
I don't have a-
can take that up separately.
I don't have a problem with having Hiram come talk about it at our next meeting, but I think we're just,
Putting off the inevitable.
this is such a small amount. We need to do the zoning regulations. Let's just get it behind us.
And ask him to come the next meeting anyway.
Yeah.
yeah.
Could we do
I don't
that
have
at least?
That was in your motion, right?
Well, let's,
No, my
no.
motion did not include
She's not
the
including
do you
25,000.
want to amend your motion? You want to approve that and then go back and have a separate motion for this?
Yes, please.
Is that sound?
That's fine with me.
That's fine.
Is that how people want? Okay.
Sure.
All those in favor of the motion?
All right.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Do I have a motion for the 25,000?
I'll make the motion, or I'll second it.
What's the motion we're going to make?
To spend $25,000 on the zoning regulations, is that what?
Make the zoning
Funded out of capital
regulations
non-recurring.
to be completed within, can we specify a time period? Is that reasonable, to complete it
I have
within
no
a?
idea.
No, we can't.
I don't know how long the effort takes.
You want to make
We
it,
don't know what
you
we're
want to put subject to Hiram appearing, or you want anything like
No,
that? or-
no.
Okay.
No, I think we want to approve it, but also
Let's just ask him to
require
come.
him to come to the next meeting
Okay.
and explain the process.
So the motion is 25,000 from fund balance,
From
Capital
the,
non-recurring.
I'm sorry, capital non-recurring.
To update the town of Simsbury zoning regulations, to bring them current.
And there's a second?
Second.
Next second. Discussion. People's thoughts on this? I know, Barb, you expressed
I have my same concern.
same concern. Linda?
it's okay.
Sorry.
Am I correct? I mean, if we don't use the money that's in that fund, you're going to end up closing it out and putting it back into the,
I can't move it.
it's just going to sit there.
It's wasting money.
I can't move it without you guys.
Well, it can be, it can be used for CNR
Correct.
and new CNR.
Well, actually, in all honesty, you can bring it back to the general fund if you wanted.
Okay, so it's
Understand,
not that we
but
can't
the
use it.
the money's there. It's already been appropriated.
Absolutely.
It's just a question of, do we want to spend it now for this purpose?
Any comments, Maura? or-
I'm all right with spending it now. I would like to have him come and just talk to us and give us some specificity.
And also a
Because it
time,
does feel like we're doing
probably a
this all the time.
timetable. I'd like them to
And a
come.
timetable.
In a timetable, because it was a long time ago, but we never got anything finished, so I'd like to make sure that he gives us an update, and he keeps you apprised to it, and you just report on it every
Yes.
so often to us.
You guys
Well, I
can
don't-
set the criteria by which the vendor gets paid.
Yeah.
You can't
Well, I
get
don't-
paid without my signature.
I don't personally want to put it into the motion, but as far as I'm concerned, if we're talking about this next June, I'm going to be upset.
Oh, that should go in the motion.
That should go to the motion, yeah.
Definitely for that one.
Yeah.
Let's get this out of the way.
Policy.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Me.
1 nay, 5. Okay, motion carries.
Oh, it's so exciting to have a little bit of controversy.
Well, we got it.
Really, you're gonna vote
All right,
against?
let's go,
Should have been budgeted.
close
I
out
can't let go of that.
old capital authorizations.
Yeah, so now we have to have a conversation.
How much money are we
I'm
talking
not gonna
about?
ask you guys for actions today, because it's transfers that have to happen. But I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the difference between appropriation and fund balance.
Oh, goody.
Counting, here we go.
Counting 101.
Now, this is 301, this is a little higher up.
I'm graduating to 301.
This is intermediate counting. That's it.
Now,
Joe's Municipal Finance 101.
well, it's unfortunate because it seems like it might not have been known by everyone in the building, but you guys are obviously responsible for appropriations. You guys are the only legislative body in the town that has the ability to appropriate dollars. I don't, Board of Selectmen doesn't, you guys do. So you guys go forth and you guys specify how much I'm allowed to either go out and borrow or how much you guys fund by, appropriating from fund balance. So to the left, I've given you guys a list of projects. These ones are all done. They're complete. And I provided you with appropriation, the spend, and the delta. Now, these deltas, anywhere that there's a negative, that is a fundamental problem for me. Those are instances where the town has overspent what you guys have appropriated. Now, it's nickel dime stuff. The Gerston land purchase was 1,500. Triangle land purchase was 55,000. Now that kind of sticks out a little bit, right? Because you guys have pretty predictable costs, right? You know how much the property was,
Yep.
but you have borrowing costs. Someone in the 2010, 2011 timeframe.
Don't go way over to the right, go to the
Yep.
middle.
So what's the difference between the way over to the right and the
Yeah.
middle?
So way over to the right that's how you get to fund balance, right? Fund balance is based on revenue, but for now we'll just stick to the left.
That's how we
Talk about the
we
negatives.
got money from. This is
The
the
negatives are
authorization.
where I need you guys, right?
A big negative way over on the right, but okay.
So the revenue was only 2.6.
So stay on the left. Where I'm gonna need you guys is like with the $1,523 for
Yeah.
that overage, right? Right now, they've spent too much. Now, because this is an old project, I'm not gonna push this back to people's operating budget. On a go-forward basis, like for example, on fiscal 14, where they've overspent capital, it's going back to their operating budget. So right now, I have library and public works fighting over just a $500 bill, but.
Good.
So this is going to be some temporary pain as we uncover some negatives, but there's also some positives out there. Now the 55,000 on the next line, the Triangle land purchase, that was
Borrowing?
an accounting mishap. All of the borrowing costs for that for that period in 2010 went to this project.
But it was many things bonded, right?
That's why you see 30,000 favorable in the next line item.
Gotcha.
Now, I'm not as interested in going back and reclassing, and I would rather just change the appropriations and wipe my hands. So the next time around, I'm going to come to you guys with.
Do we have the authority to do that?
Yep.
Yes.
How?
Appropriate. You just.
So we're
Same.
appropriating.
We can
Right.
appropriate by.
But
The
but
funniest
even
part
on
is-
something that was town approved?
Under the 1%, well, we can appropriate.
Yeah. What's the concern on the?
That it went to referendum.
So the effort itself went to referendum, which is great, and that now you're just talking about small incremental changes that are based on that fall within your 1%. Yeah, you'd be allowed to do that.
What would have happened if they came to us and said there's a project overrun? That's what should have happened. You don't go back through a town meeting, a small amount, you just deal with it.
As long as we stay within our 1%.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
These are all.
So where's the other 24? You found us 30.
Oh, no. There was also some just general overspend there.
Yeah, excited. I showed some more. Keep going, keep going.
Found some favorability in Simsbury Farms renovation, Ethel Walker, the Board of Education had some favorability. Now, these favorabilities, they're not necessarily real, right? Because this
We didn't
is
bond
difference-
them all.
Gone.
This is difference between appropriation and spend. Now, real favorability is over on the right. This is where you talk about revenue and fund balance, right? So what's revenue? Revenue is me going out and borrow, you guys receiving grants, getting state aid, donations, anything like that. So the way that you measure fund balance is how much revenue do you guys have versus how much expenditures went out. So I always say I have a problem in the first two. The second one is rather frustrating because you guys appropriated 2.75, you only borrowed 2.68. So I don't know why it was done short, but you guys will see a transfer from me probably at the next meeting. Now the good news is that as you go down, you start to see we have fund balances pretty much all the way down, and the high school project, that's the 670,000. So it's going to provide you guys with a lot of coverage.
So net, we're looking at like 400 and.
Oh, yeah, you
Big number.
So are you asking us to do anything today?
I am not asking you to do anything today.
Okay.
Because
But you will
I would
next
like
month.
to have a much larger list. I have some questions on my board. I have some questions in with the auditors, specifically with the bond premiums. Bond premiums is encumbrances. She was very inconsistent with her treatment of encumbrances. Encumbrances affect fund balance. It's a reserve. It's a preservation of fund balance. For the life of me, I can't even figure out how.
But so,
It's not worth it.
at least on this list, we're way ahead of the game.
You are way,
So
way
it's not a
ahead.
problem.
Well, it's the high school.
What we have to do in the future is make sure that our finance director, we hold them, their feet to the fire every year to close out capital projects, because bad things can happen. Plus, you have a authorization to spend out there, and people can only spend it. The longer it's out there, the sooner we get off the table, the better, I feel.
Well, the high school is the classic example. I mean, we appropriated $43 million and only
Yes.
spent 36.
Right.
And a lot of that's just because of, building costs were favorable, the bonding, everything worked in our favor in doing that project.
Timing was
Committee
good.
did a good job.
Yeah, they did great.
Yes, the
You were
public
right,
building
Art.
committee.
They
But-
did.
But,
no.
but,
Yeah.
but this project was started when, in 94? I'm sorry, 2004?
A long time ago.
Uh,
My
There were
daughter
some-
was still in
There were
high
some
school.
legal issues that
She's been out 9 years.
we were going after people to get some money with some,
I know, there
So
were,
that's
Well, they
part of
didn't
why
have
it
the
didn't close
final
out.
audit till 2 years ago.
right.
Yeah.
and there were some settlements with, electrical contractors or whatever, and
Will this all
the
accrue
plumber,
to
the-
the
Yeah, I know.
reserve, to the,
No, we'll
it
wait
will-
to the next item. We'll get to.
ultimately, where does the money go back to the net?
So because most of this was paid for with bond proceeds, I'm definitely going to push you guys to keep it in capital, right? Rating agencies and accountants don't like to see you guys take bond proceeds or bond favorability from capital projects and moving over to your operating budget.
It's called arbitrage.
So, but in other words, can we use to fund CNR or no?
Well,
You can use it,
For capital.
you can use it for capital. I mean, you have borrowing needs now that you could probably.
you can use it for Henry James
I
Locker.
mean, he's gonna go, he's gonna go out, you're going out in January, right?
I am.
And so this
We
would
can use this
offset
to-
that to
Offset,
some
yeah.
extent.
Use this to lower the,
And
Jo-
then hopefully some of it you guys are going to use in like 45 seconds.
Joe, in this,
What's that?
44, 43, 42, 41.
we'll talk to you about that. In the center column of the page there, the okay to close, does that mean that these are not closed out yet?
No. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, yes. I mean, these are absolutely not closed out.
I thought we had closed the high school out some months ago.
Well, I technically did. Peter and I are having a little bit of an argument around who isn't allowed to
Who do you
close
think's
out
gonna win
projects.
the argument?
Well, see, like with my wife, I pick my battles. This isn't one I'm picking.
We authorize it, I want us to unauthorize the amount. We have an
He just
open
likened you to
authorization.
his wife.
I was thinking the same.
Lucky Peter.
I just feel better for our board, because we did the authorization and we close out the authorization. I just think that's tidier to do. So
Gotcha.
that's why he's gonna come back with an accurate schedule,
But
and
I
we're
mean,
gonna
and-
tidy everything up.
Accurate.
Now, when you were talking, with the auditors last week about problems with capital accounting, that's what this is all about, obviously, right?
Yeah, this unwinds a lot of it. This is more of a proper statement for your how you're
There are
financing.
more of these, though, that you're working on?
Oh, yeah. You have like 85 of them.
It's good, big.
I'm aware we have a lot of capital projects, but,
The auditors had spent a lot of extra time with our accounting wasn't right the last couple of years. so.
okay, but you're trying to go through and reconcile every one of them.
From the beginning of time to present, yeah.
Let me know when you get to Noah's Ark, okay?
All right,
Next time.
so that's for our information, so he's been working on that for the last couple of months, so he's got a ways to go.
So, Peter, can I raise this concern already with conversations we've had. When you bond money and approve money, there's language that is very broad, but tells you what you can use that money for. And so I'm concerned on any one of these where we went out and bonded it, that we get council's agreement that it can be used for something unrelated to the bond language that it was approved for. So, to me, and if I recall the bond language, it's very, very broad, and so using it for a school project, if it was a school project, may be broad enough to fit, but I think we need to be careful in policy and not just suggesting that we can just bring it back in and use it for something unrelated to the actual bond language that we got that money under. And we've had this conversation, but I'm still nervous that we have the
I will tell you,
authority.
the bond council that you guys have for this town is one of the more conservative ones I've ever encountered in my entire life. And if she's not worried, I'm not even in the ballpark of worried. But I understand your
But can we
concern.
get that from her in writing, that closing out projects, any excess we can do, we have flexibility on what we do with it?
Yeah, that's why she wrote this today.
Oh, thank you.
So we're going to go on to the funding for Henry James. That's what this is about?
Correct. This is actually what you guys would have to read into the record, and the Board of Selectmen has one as well. There is not a problem because the Board of Selectmen hasn't approved it yet. She said that the order of operations doesn't matter, and I can send you guys that email.
I really want to read it before we,
You're going to have to read it out loud.
No, read it out loud
yeah,
anyway.
but can I just read it first and understand it?
Gonna read the whole thing?
Well,
As long as you don't ask any questions on it, because I think it just showed up.
why don't I make a motion
Can't we waive the reading?
that we can't. So why don't I make a motion that we recommend and approve the appropriation by the town of Simsbury, $280,000, in accordance with the following resolution, and then go ahead and read the resolution. I can start it and we kind of go through it.
Sure.
Okay, resolved, one, that the Board of Finance recommends and approves the appropriation by the town of Simsbury of $280,000 on the issue of bonds or notes and temporary notes in an amount not to exceed $280,000 in parens, to finance the appropriation for renovations and improvements to the hallway on the first floor of the Henry James Memorial School. The appropriation may be spent for equipment, furnishings, materials, site improvements, legal fees, net temporary interest, and other financing costs, and other expenses related to the project and its financing. The Board of Education may determine the particulars, may reduce or modify the scope of the project, and the entire appropriation may be spent on the reduced or modified project. Where are you at?
The proceeds of the town of Simsbury general obligation bonds issue of 2012 in an amount not to exceed $280,000 shall be reallocated to finance the appropriation, and the amount of bonds, notes, and temporary notes authorized shall be reduced by the amount of bond proceeds so allocated. Reallocated. 3, that any additional bonds or notes issued pursuant to this resolution shall be issued pursuant to Section 7-369 and 10-289 of the General Statutes of Connecticut, revision of 1958, as amended, and any other enabling acts. The bonds or notes shall be general obligations of the town secured by the irrevocable pledge of the full faith and credit of the town. The term of the bond or notes shall not exceed 10 years.
Peter?
When do you want to
Number 4, that any temporary notes issued from time to time pursuant to this resolution in anticipation of the receipt of the proceeds from the sale of the bonds or notes for the project shall be issued pursuant to Sections 7-378 and 10-289A of the General Statutes of Connecticut, revision of 1958, as amended. The notes shall be general obligations of the town and shall be secured by the irrevocable pledge of the full faith and credit of the town. The town shall comply with the provisions of Section 7-378A of the General Statutes with respect to any notes that do not mature within the time permitted by said Section 7-378.
That the first selectman and the treasurer of the town shall sign any bonds or notes by their manual or facsimile signatures. The law firm of Day Pitney LLP is designated as bond counsel to approve the legality of the bonds or notes. The first selectman and the treasurer are authorized to determine the amounts, dates, interest rates, maturities, redemption provisions, form, and other details of the bonds or notes. to designate one or more banks or trust companies to be certifying bank, registrar, transfer agent, and paying agent for the bonds or notes, to provide for the keeping of a record of the bonds or notes, to designate a financial advisor to the town in connection with the sale of the bonds or notes, to sell the bonds or notes at public or private sale, to deliver the bonds or notes, and to perform all other acts which are necessary or appropriate to issue the bonds or notes.
Number 6, that the town hereby declares its official intent under federal income tax regulation section 1.150-2 that project costs may be paid from temporary advances of available funds, and that the town reasonably expects to reimburse any such advances from the proceeds of the borrowings in an aggregate principal amount not in excess of the amount of borrowings authorized above for the project. The first selectman and the treasurer are authorized to amend such declaration of official intent as they deem necessary or advisable, and to bind the town pursuant to such representations and covenants as they deem necessary or advisable in order to maintain the continued exemption from federal income taxation of interest on the bonds or notes authorized by this resolution, if issued on a tax-exempt basis, including covenants to pay rebates of investment earnings to the United States in future years.
7, that the first selectman and the treasurer are authorized to make representations and enter into written agreements for the benefit of holders of the bonds or notes to provide secondary market disclosure information, which agreements may include such terms as they deem advisable or appropriate in order to comply with applicable laws or rules pertaining to the sale or purchase of such bonds or notes. 8, that the Board of Selectmen, the first selectman, the treasurer, and other proper officers of the town are authorized to take all other actions which is necessary or desirable to complete the project and to issue bonds, notes, or other obligations to finance the aforesaid appropriation.
Do we have a second
Second.
conditional motion?
Second.
Second.
That is the motion.
All right, discussion.
So, since that was a lot, what I think this is essentially doing is we're not really going to borrow anything. Paragraph 2 is the meat of this, and we're essentially doing the typical bond language approval and instead taking money from our 2012 bond issue
So that was the refunding
moving it here.
opportunity for this
for the high
project.
school, right?
So, everyone feels comfortable?
Yeah, now I do.
Okay, good.
Yeah, this is the motion, this is what I voted against 2 months ago, because was it just me or you two?
We wanted the students' voices to be heard, and we got a report last meeting. that
Yeah,
they
but
were-
we have wasted a tremendous amount of time because of all of this. I think it's wonderful to have the students' representation and hear them out and so forth, but the Board of Ed has gone around on this for 2 months now, and I think it's just a shame that we've held this up.
All right, all those ready to vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Me. Sorry, passing.
Motion carried. All right, any other business anyone wants to bring up?
I think we should try to end on time, because we have people waiting in the hall.
Yes, I have just a quick question. Somebody did send us voting for board chair and vice chair and what to do in the event of a tie. And we were supposed to review that for this. So are we going to discuss that this time? It's not on
No.
the agenda, but is that something that'll?
Board
Next.
rules, right? I thought that was on the agenda the last time.
I sent something, I did send something around, people to review, maybe next meeting, can we perhaps?
Do we have a whole set of rules for the, well, shouldn't we wait and do the set of rules when we
Last time.
have it?
Yeah, why don't we?
Part of, it, yeah.
I mean, you guys have a committee, right?
Yeah.
Have you met to do rules?
We actually,
We'll put it on next agenda, send us around a set of rules, and then we'll put it on next time to go through it, so we can start discussing it. That sound reasonable?
Yes.
Anything else?
Motion to dismiss?
adjourned.
Adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I actually dismiss
We
is a good
adjourn.
word, because I feel like a student having read that.